Welcome to the Elemental Awakening. Welcome everyone to another episode of Elemental Awakening podcast. I'm your host Gio, and today I have a special guest, Alex Dorr, or Doer, depending on what part of the world you're from. You may pronounce it differently. He's the founder of a company called Mushroom Revival, and he's here today to tell us a bit about, enlighten us a bit about mushrooms in general, and tell us a bit about his story on how he became a mycologist and got into mushrooms, and how I think, and he will tell us about how mushrooms can have the potential to change the world. So, Alex, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing me on. It's an honor.
Yeah, so I guess the best place to start on a podcast is let's get to know a bit about you. Tell us about, what's your backstory and how you got to do the things you do today. What brought you to become a founder of a mushroom company?
I'm always wanting to ask the mushrooms this question of, what is the story of how you inoculated Alex Dorr? And I want to hear it from the fungi's perspective, because really it doesn't seem like I had a choice. It really seems like I was chosen for this process and sign my life away. There's no turning back. And, I got into it through my own health journey, and I grew up not knowing what healthy eating was. I ate pizza and mac and cheese probably daily, lack of vegetables,
No
and
vegetables on the pizza. There's tomatoes on there, right? This is the standard
no
American diet,
pepperoni
right?
pizza. I mean, it was a Kraft mac and cheese. I mean, it was bad. Like, and pharmaceutical. I mean, just didn't know really the world of health, and it wasn't part of my upbringing. But until, I got diagnosed with chronic anxiety, chronic depression, Lyme disease growing up, and really committed myself from that point to live a healthier way of life. And so I got into yoga, I got into healthy eating, qigong, and all the works, right, of all these modalities to try to improve and support my well-being. And through that journey, I through my studying and all that stuff, I found the supportive aspects of functional mushrooms for overall health and well-being. And, through that journey and through that, my own personal experience of utilizing functional mushrooms to support my health, I read every book that I could. I, dove head first into the mushroom realm and found out they could clean up oil spills. They can create new styrofoams, they can create faux meat, they can, create new dyes, all this crazy stuff. And no one was talking about it, at least in my circle. And most people in North America were just not really talking about it as much as I thought they should, right? And there are parts of the world that have such a rich history with mushrooms, like China or a lot of European countries. But in North America, it's pretty sparse, right? There are some history, but most of which has been erased or just not really embraced as much as I think it should. And so, I took every class, every internship, read every single book that I could I literally dropped every dime that I had on every book that I could buy on mushrooms, and just had stacks arrive to my house. And that's what I would do. I would read, cover to cover, go out mushroom hunting for hours a day, and cover like my dining room and kitchen table with mushrooms and try to ID as many as possible before they all rotted. And my roommates at the time would get so mad because we'd have like all these rotting mushrooms all over the house. And they'd be like, wait, I'm not done. I haven't ID'd that part of the table yet, And yeah, and it really came to a pinpoint when I was in Ecuador, and I did a field study there studying different biodiversity and different ecosystems. And there was a point in the journey where, I was there for months, and we're in the Amazon rainforest. So obviously there's tons of mushrooms, like unbelievable amount of mushrooms, and the biodiversity of them are astounding. The colors, the shapes, the sizes. You're finding some that are half the size of your pinky fingernail, and then some that are bigger than your arm's length, and it's like, wow, and all these colors and morphologies, and was actually studying atta ants, or leafcutter ants is what most people know them as, or those ants that you see going in a line carrying leaves on their back.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't know they're actually carrying those leaves back to their nest, nibbling them up into a mushy leaf ball, and growing fungus on them. And they do that as their sole food source. So they're mushroom farmers, and they do that to feed the colony of ants. So we're studying, how many leaves do they take back to their nest to transform into this fungal biomass. And
So you just sit there with like
also,
a clicker all day and just like,
yeah, we would actually
wow,
set up cameras and do time lapses, and then go back and count how many ants would go back. And
wow,
then we would pick random leaf specimens and weigh them on like a super fine scale, and then get an average. And it
super
was fun. It
interesting.
was really zen. It was great. And was also finding cordyceps, which, if people don't know, you might have seen them if you've watched Planet or any BBC kind of Night on Earth documentary. There's probably a cordyceps section, and they're mushrooms that pop out of insects' heads, and they're right out of a sci-fi film. So I was finding dozens of those, even hundreds of them, when I was exploring, and that was blew my mind. Literally, it was just like, this is insane. And it really wasn't until we were at this specific research station, and it was the most biodiverse region on the planet. So it was number one biodiverse region on the planet, and it was also home to the Warani people, which is a really famous Ecuadorian tribe in Ecuador. And it was also the site for an oil drilling site. And this oil drilling company came in and really displaced this tribe's way of life, and really just disrupted their health, their well-being, their way of life in so many different ways. And I got to see that firsthand, and interview, multiple generations of this specific region of this tribe, and also saw these unlined pits of oil just sitting in the Amazon rainforest. And I stumbled upon it, and I don't think I was supposed to be there. There was guards with like fully automatic rifles guarding certain areas, and
Wow.
they weren't looking at that specific area at that time. They drove away, and I don't think I was supposed to see it. But I did, and it really stuck with me. It was just the smell, and it was almost a mile away, and I could see the fumes come up, and just that rainbow colored murky oil pit, and it reeked, and it was just toxic. At the same time, as I was reading that mushrooms and fungi can actually clean up oil spills and degrade them into organic matter, and really transform ecosystems. So that was like, wow, mushrooms can save the world, right? So I went back home, changed my major to mycology, and ended up writing a 230-page book on microremediation. So how fungi can degrade toxic waste in the environment. And that was my final thesis in school. And after school, I was like, okay, I can do more, right? And how do I find the perfect balance between paying my bills, doing something I love, doing something I'm good at, and doing something that the world needs? And so that was the first creation for Mushroom Revival. And we're a dietary supplement company, and the whole mission was to revive people's health and also the planet's health. So today on we're recording on Earth Day in 2021, and we just planted 10,000 trees in the Amazon rainforest. And it just comes full circle of, we're making products with functional mushrooms to support people's health and well-being, and at the same time supporting the biodiversity of the planet that we're on, right? We're not separate from the planet. We are one with the world around us. So that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Wow, super inspiring. I love that. Okay, so tell me a bit about the company. So you go from super passionate student of mushrooms in the Amazon jungle, seeing, some of the atrocities of capitalism and then coming back inspired. How did the company actually start, like get off the ground? Was it like hobby, started selling at farmers markets? What's that story? Because it doesn't sound like you went to business school, which is always an interesting leap from a passion into the
Yeah.
business world. So tell me a bit about that story and how that sort of unfolded.
I am not a business person whatsoever, and I'm having to take my MBA in a speed round, real world MBA, and it's super interesting, because with any passion, you could really see how interconnected the world is. Because I'm really into mushrooms, and through that passion, now I'm a master in business. I'm a master in photography. I'm a master in podcasting. I'm a blah 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 XYZ, and you got to be a jack of all trades, and you really see that you cannot be interested in one single thing. And by being interested in one thing, you're interested in life itself. And so, I've taken some business classes, and but it's really just been, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it. Let's try it. Fail forward a million times. I can't even tell you how many times we failed miserably, and just it's
As a
all about
serial
getting back up.
entrepreneur, I know your pain. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
it's
there's a
always
passion
like,
that drives it, right? There's a passion that drives to keep going because,
for
you want to
sure.
see this thing through.
And you're always doing a new thing and super excited about it. Like, wow, we're so sophisticated now. And then a month later, you're looking back at that stage. You're like, oh my God, how embarrassing. I can't believe we did that. And it's always that journey, right? And you're
It's
just
an evolution.
2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Yeah. And it was really helpful to have some industry experience. So having a background in mycology, just in academia, but also, I've worked in many different mushroom farms all around the world, and have that background of commercial production, extraction, selling products, things like that. So I do have real world experience with the whole mushroom industry. So that was super helpful with going into this, and with my passion. And it almost gives me a leg up from someone straight out of business school who doesn't have
100%.
experience in the mushroom industry trying to start their own. And so, we started small. It started in my living room, and then my basement, and then, it just kept expanding in different rooms of the house until
So
my
were you selling actual mushrooms? Were you selling tinctures? How did you decide which products to sell? Like, tell me a bit about that process there. Because living
yeah.
room, the growth, yeah. What was that based on? Were you like testing the market, seeing what people liked, guessing?
Yeah, we started with tinctures. I have an herbalism background, so that is something I'm comfortable with, and it's a type of product that I consume on a daily basis, many many times a day. But we really started with growing Cordyceps militaris, which is a type of mushroom that supports energy and athletic performance and things like that. And it was a mushroom that has been popular for thousands of years, but it's very new to the US. And I was one of the first growers ever in the United States to start growing this mushroom. And through the years of growing the business, we actually made the largest Cordyceps militaris mushroom farm in the Americas, and the first USDA certified organic Cordyceps militaris
Wow,
mushroom farm. And
congratulations.
so that was our bread and butter. And that's what we started with. Actually, like, snuck into my university lab at midnight every day, trying to use their equipment to start up. And
How long
uh,
ago was this? What are we talking time frame? Like,
it's
you look
been,
fairly young, I would say. You don't look
yeah,
that old. So tell me, what's the time frame we're talking here?
that was about 3.5 years ago.
That
So
you made the first organic farm, or that you started the business?
the first organic farm was 2019. And when I started the business, it was 2018.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay,
So
so
fairly new.
starting cordyceps, making tinctures, bottling them, and then where's the customer base come from? Is it like farmers markets? Are you going online? Like that's
We are 99.9% online D2C. I'm young, and that's what I know. I shop online, and uh, shopping in a brick and mortar store is really foreign to me, and it seems so arduous and laborious. And that's me. That's my generation. I'm all about how do you get things as quick as possible, right? And so that's what I was familiar with, and so we just stuck with it, and it worked great, right?
Mm.
We are in stores across the country, but it's not our main focus. It's really easy for us to ship. We have a small light product. It's pretty easy to ship all around the world. So.
Amazing. Amazing. And so did you just stick with cordyceps? And was cordyceps like, what are some of the properties you said of cordyceps? You said it was energy focused, was like a pick me upper type thing.
Yeah, so we work with 10 different functional mushrooms. Cordyceps was our bread and butter and still is. I mean, and it came from that obsession of seeing kind of cousin relatives in the Amazon rainforest and just being blown away at them. So really how they interact in the wild is they actually grow in bugs, and that might freak a lot of people out, and it's really really interesting. And one of the most famous species is actually called Ophiocordyceps sinensis, which is a cousin of the militaris that we grow and use, and it grows in the Himalayan region of Tibet at like 15,000 feet. And these foragers have to go out on their hands and knees and look for these tiny little
Those must be
twig-like
some
mushrooms.
potent mushrooms from the Himalayas up that
They
high.
are, and they're worth their weight in gold. And they haven't figured out how to cultivate them. So this is a cousin species, Cordyceps militaris. They look like Cheeto-looking mushrooms, and so some of the benefits, they support overall energy, athletic performance, and they've been used for athletes for as long as they've been around. And there's a couple of main compounds in Cordyceps militaris that are really famous. One being cordycepin, the other adenosine. And that works with our natural ATP process in our body. So ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is food for our mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. I'm sure everyone is recapping their high school biology class right now, but that is really, cordyceps help support energy on the cellular level, and it's a natural form of energy, and it's different from coffee, where you're getting a short boost of energy and then you crash and burn, right?
Doesn't coffee caffeine fill the adenosine receptors in the brain to make you not feel tired, and then the brain sort
Yeah, it
of
actually
is like,
suffocates your brain. And
yeah,
it does almost pretty much the opposite of what cordyceps do, where it actually suffocates the brain. So your body thinks you're dying and will bring you in a sense of fight or flight. So it's really draining for the
two
whole
to two
adrenal
to three
system.
times a day for many people, where it's like,
I
hey, jerk
know.
off.
Yeah. 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 And you're just like, revved up. And cordyceps work on the opposite way, is where it's a natural process. It's building and nourishing for the whole body. And they're all functional mushrooms are adaptogens. And what adaptogens are, it's a really famous word right now, and it's being thrown around a lot. What adaptogens are, they're herbs or mushrooms that help support our body's natural ability to deal with occasional stress and fatigue. I, for one, can use that on a daily basis, and I do. And that's why I love working with adaptogens and functional mushrooms, especially cordyceps and other mushrooms like lion's mane and reishi, and chaga, and other functional mushrooms that we work with. And then the other aspect of functional mushrooms, of why they're so famous, is that they help support our immune system. And so they're packed with, notably these 1316 beta glucans, which are just, complex polysaccharides or long sugar chain like molecules that help support our immune system, which is also incredibly important and aids those supportive adaptogenic properties of mushrooms.
So yeah, so I guess I do take up personally a supplement myself that is mushroom based with cordyceps by one of the major brands in the industry. So I do kind of also swear by it as something that keeps me sort of healthy and keeps the immune system strong. So I totally agree. So I got a question around how the mushrooms are grown. Because like you mentioned, the potency in the Himalayas versus are your farms outdoor, indoor, or I know you said organic. Sometimes organic can mean like just without pesticides, but is organic grown outside versus inside the same sort of thing when it comes to
Yeah.
mushroom?
So
What
yeah, so it depends on the species, right? So some mushrooms can be grown indoors and they actually thrive better indoors. Cordyceps militaris does great indoors, and they're really particular about their climate, so they need to be climate controlled. However, a lot of our other mushrooms like reishi are grown outdoors, and they have shade cloths and they're logs buried underground, and the reishi kind of pop up on the mountainside, and they're beautiful. And then chaga, grow naturally on birch trees. And so that, there's a protected forest that, has been protected from pesticide use and can be certified USDA organic. And these are pretty strict regulations, the USDA organic certifications. And being USDA certified organic, you have to also be non-GMO as well. And through our process, we only use the fruiting bodies. And what that means is the actual mushroom itself. And there's a lot of companies, especially in North America, where a lot of companies will use something called mycelium or mycelium on grain. And that's just the roots of the mushroom itself. And a lot of times, unfortunately, there are zero mushrooms in those products. And some of the most famous brands that there are no mushrooms in there. And some of them had to change their packaging to write, mycelium on grain, but some of them are still promoting their products as mushrooms, where there are zero mushrooms, surprisingly, in the product. And
So
for
are there
some
no
people,
benefits to the mycelium? Like, does the mycelium doesn't do anything, or is there any benefit to consuming mycelium?
yeah, mycelium is great, and it's definitely a huge proponent and a part of the fungal organism. However, for a nutraceutical and a dietary supplement, the compounds in particular that we're looking for, they're a fraction of the amount in the mycelium on grain and the
Gotcha.
mycelium. So those compounds that I'm talking about, and I talked about before, the 1316 beta glucans for the immune support. Those compounds are minimal in the mycelium on grain and barely even there. So they are there in very small amounts. So it's not like it's not doing anything, but if you're spending large bucks on a supplement, you really want the most potent product, which is actual mushrooms, right? And actual fruiting bodies. And so, for cordyceps in particular, that, you're talking about, that I was just talking about, we tested, the fruiting bodies versus the mycelium or the mycelium on grain for various different compounds. And we found that the 1316 beta glucans were 400 times more in the fruiting bodies compared to the mycelium on grain,
Wow. That's not
gram
a
for
little.
gram.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
A
a
lot.
ton times. It's not even, it's not percent. It's 400 times more potent. And then other compounds like cordycepin and adenosine that I was talking about for that energy support, we found that they were 57 times more potent in the fruiting bodies compared to the mycelium. Adenosine was about 17 times. Amino acids were also a lot higher in the fruiting bodies. And this is, mushroom to mushroom. It's pretty consistent, and it's been tested by dozens of different labs all throughout dozens
So
of years.
so yes, like in most food products or nutraceutical products, they have like a label that says how much of everything is in it. Are these certain things that you can make claims on and say like, hey, there's X many times more in here, or we've lab tested to say like we have this X amount of beta glucans or adenosine in a product? Is that something that
Yeah,
you,
and we do. We're actually one of the only companies in the world that has a QR code that you can see our lab results.
cool?
Most companies actually hide their lab results
Of course.
because of what I just said. And if you ask them, they will, if you ask them on social media, they will delete your account, they'll delete your comments and block you.
Wow.
And yeah, and if you ask them, they'll give you a weird response that doesn't really answer your questions. So yeah, if you're looking for dietary supplements, they should be totally transparent with their lab results. And we have a QR code. We're not hiding anything. We're super confident in our extractions and our potency. And we want to show the world. And it's not only like, look how good we are. It's also creating an industry standard,
I
right?
think that's
We
great.
want everyone to do it, and
I
we
think we
want
should have transparency in every industry across the board, and
totally,
I think we live in a world where that's a rare occurrence. And I think a lot of people on the planet are suffering because of everything that is trying to hide, most likely to cut corners to make more money, in my opinion, in most
yeah,
cases, because the world has kind of been designed to push for profits over,
totally,
the people and the planet.
yeah,
But I'm a firm believer, and one of my sort of missions and passions is to sort of create and inspire a generation of entrepreneurs that find that balance where a little bit of profit is okay, but balanced with everything else that we're trying to do so that there is a planet left, for my kids and grandkids. So yeah, so I agree with that. And thank you for being so transparent with your products. Um, so I guess another question around sustainability. There's some products are destroying the rainforest from a sustainability perspective, whether that's ease to reproduce, also, I guess from a carbon footprint or pollution perspective. Tell me about the mushroom industry and specifically your process. Is it highly sustainable? I would think, mushrooms can grow infinitely. Okay, so also, like when we look at the psychedelic industry as a whole, things like psilocybin, I would say would be much more sustainable than ayahuasca, which is ripping up the rainforest in search of these big vines and harvesting at a rate that's unsustainable. So tell me a bit about the sustainability and the impact on the environment from mushroom production.
totally. And mushrooms can be so sustainable, and the opposite, like anything, right? And psilocybin mushrooms, I think 10,000 feet, are unbelievably more sustainable than a lot of psychedelic herbs or plants, like ayahuasca, for example, or the bufo toad, right? Or these toads that they're catching and then tying up, scraping the venom off, and
So,
or
Sonoran
ayahuasca, which takes
Desert, yeah.
so long to to grow, or peyote, which also is, I think, the slowest growing cacti in the world, and all these other ones. Psilocybin mushrooms takes like a month to grow, and with it's so cheap, so fast. A lot of times they're grown in these unfortunately plastic tubs, but you can reuse those tubs for life, right? And so that's incredible. And with most mushroom production, unfortunately, they're grown in single-use bags, and there are techniques that a lot of countries are pioneering, which you can use these containers over and over. So one of the practices that we use in our cordyceps farm is to reuse these containers for life, right? And so no single-use plastic or minimal is really, really important in these practices. And a lot of times they're grown outdoors with limited environment controlled systems. And so, that they can be incredibly sustainable. And fungi in the environment are one of the keystones of our biodiversity, right? So soil fungi can sequester up to 80% of the soil carbon. And they are incredibly important for plant life, right? So mycorrhizal fungi, these fungi that connect to plant roots, they connect to up to 95% of terrestrial plants and are vital for their survival, right? And they help get nutrients from the soil and pass it to the plants. They can harvest water and hold it in drought seasons and slowly give it back to the plant. They create these underground internet connections between plant to plant so they can communicate and even transfer nutrients from one plant to another. And so fungi are inherently sustainable for the whole world. And like I was talking about before, they have the ability to degrade xenotoxins, really toxic chemicals in our environment and create luscious ecosystems, right? And that's what they're doing. When a tree falls in the forest, they're making sure those nutrients are available to other plants and crucial for our nutrient cycling.
Yeah, I've even seen articles online that say how it can eat plastic or even nuclear waste. They're seeing some fungi can clean up. I think it was Chernobyl. They were seeing fungi growing and eating up some of the nuclear waste there. So
Yeah,
um,
I'm actually the co-host of the number one mushroom podcast in the world, Mushroom Revival podcast, and we've had a couple researchers come on talking about fungi's ability to eat radioactive isotopes. And one of the main researchers in Chernobyl came on our show, and they found dozens of different species in Chernobyl only eating that radioactive waste, right? Fungi are incredibly resilient. I mean, there's 69 different types of fungi found underneath the Pacific Ocean, and one that was dormant for over 20 million years. The spores, and they planted the spores. It actually grew a mushroom after 20 million years underneath
wow.
the ocean in hibernation. There's dozens of fungi found in Antarctica in the snow. I don't know what they're eating or how they're surviving, but they're doing it. And even fungi have shown the ability to survive in space. Thrown out of a space station and brought on board after
Well,
6 months.
I think, yeah, I've seen some theories of evolution that we came here as mushrooms from another galaxy, and started the whole
Yeah,
thing. Because I think we also share DNA with mushrooms. I'm pretty sure as well. So
up to
um,
50%, over 50% of our DNA is shared with fungi, and that theory is panspermia. So because of they can survive in these super radioactive spaces on uh, you know, in space, in Chernobyl, it's not too far off to think that spores were in hibernation for 20 plus million years and an asteroid and hit Earth, and life evolved from there. It's not too far out to think that.
right, yeah,
Had to come from somewhere.
yeah,
So
absolutely. Okay, so you mentioned a few specific mushrooms. I think you mentioned reishi, you mentioned chaga, you mentioned cordyceps. Is there a ranking order that you would say, like, hey, like the top is like the reishi, then you would say like chaga, followed by cordyceps? Like, I'm talking like power or preference of you. I'm trying to pick my words very carefully
totally.
here.
No, that's a great question. And it's a hard one to answer because it depends on who you're asking and what for, right? So if
So
we're
I'd say
talking
let's start
about
with like longevity overall. Like,
longevity, I would say reishi. And that is because it's called the 10,000 year mushroom in traditional Chinese herbalism. And they actually rank it as the number one herb in traditional Chinese herbalism, as like the top of the top, and
I
the
heard a
list of
story that
benefits.
in ancient China, if anyone was caught taking it, they would cut their hands off if they weren't the royal family using it, or
Cordyceps too.
cordyceps too. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were onto
Super
something.
revered,
Yeah.
super revered. And, they were first written in traditional Chinese herbalism around 20 AD. And that was one of the first times on planet Earth that fungi were actually written about in written texts.
So, okay. So longevity, then what about for like performance? Cordyceps?
Cordyceps all day is for energy and athletic performance support.
I can't even say this word, but where would you think that chaga would fall in? What would that be a good sort of, would that ever rank at the top? Because at one time, like, people were telling me chagas, and I used to go finding birch trees and hacking a little piece off. And I'll ask you a question about harvesting next. But
Yeah, please, please. That subject is really important to talk about. And this is a little nerdy, but chaga is not technically a mushroom. It's technically a sclerotia. And that's, it's just a conch. It's just another word for it. So the mushroom actually comes later. And so it can be unsustainable if you harvest a lot of the chaga, because that is not the reproductive organism. The reproductive state of a fungus is the mushroom, the fruiting body. And that comes later once the tree falls and actually creates a mushroom in between the bark of this birch tree. And it looks not like a normal mushroom that the cap and stem. And chaga has been known for its immune support. And a lot of it's super tasty as well. So people will make teas and, even a coffee replacement or blend it with their coffee, and it's super, super tasty. Yeah, it's one of my favorite tasting functional fungi out there.
So can you farm chaga? Like, is there a way to sort of, or is that like a proprietary process? Tell me about that, because I always thought it only grows wild. You get lucky if you find one. Don't take it all, leave some behind. Tell me about that. Educate me on the process and what to,
Yeah, you
yeah.
you can, and there are only a few people doing it in the world. They're doing it in Finland. They're doing it in various parts of Siberia, and that's where we get all of our chaga. It's not, I'd love to get it more locally, but they have programs in Siberia set up to where you need a permit to harvest it, and you can only harvest X amount of the chaga, and then you have to report it to an agency, and they go in and they plant new birch trees and inoculate it with chaga. And there's a whole system set up there.
So if a
So here in
birch
the
tree has
US,
chaga in it, is it in the process of dying? Is it infected with like a fungus or a host? Is it like eating the tree or taking energy from the tree?
kind of just a tiny bit when the tree is alive. And it's not enough to make it a pure parasite, right? The tree is still vibrant, it's still living. And the fungi will just take a tiny bit just to survive, but not enough to really harm the tree. It's only when the tree becomes sick or it's in its final days that the chaga will turn into a parasite and really kill off the tree. So you can think of it like, end of life care. It's a quick way out, and and that's where and we're still understanding that life cycle because it is a little ominous right now, and so we're still figuring out what is going on with chaga and the birch tree. And a lot of the compounds come from the birch tree, like betulinic acid, and there's a few other famous ones. And so when companies, like we're talking about that mycelium on grain, you can't get it from grain, right? And so
Mm.
those compounds of interest, if you're growing mycelium on grain in a sterile laboratory, they've done studies that there's zero if levels of these compounds, if not super negligible for betulinic acid and like compounds that are super famous for chaga. So it is important to get that sclerotia from a birch tree and try to do it as
And
sustainably as
can you
possible.
hurt the tree by taking it off improperly? Like, is there a way to damage the tree or anything like that?
Yeah, I wouldn't take a pickaxe to it, or hack away at it, and it will leave a spot where other parasitic things can get into that wound. But trees have a natural, just like for our body, we create scabs, and it will heal over, but it will create a space where other things can get in to that wound.
Yeah, last fall, a couple of friends, we were up north in Algonquin Park in Ontario, and we got a bit I got a bit lost, and I thought in the corner of my eye there was a monkey on the tree, and there was this massive chaga, like literally the size of my head. I'm not a hunter, I'm not a fisher. Like I went vegetarian a while back, and I thought, wow, that was be a nice trophy to sort of have. But I was a little bit nervous about it coming off. It was just coming straight off. So I said, I'll give it 5 little nudges. If it comes off in 5, it's mine. And on the 5th one, just like fell right off perfectly. And I was like, wow. And I got it at our studio in Toronto. I haven't used it yet. I don't know if it's just energetically there in the space, almost like just holding that space down. But yeah, it's kind of a fascinating thing, and it's beautiful as well.
And a
Um,
little chunk can go a long way. So
a
chaga
long
is
way,
awesome. Like you can reboil it for tea every day for months and months, and it'll be this pure black tea. It'd be
right?
super dark, and you just keep boiling it over and over and over. And there's so much chaga tea that you can get out of just a tiny
Just a
little
tiny
chunk.
little
So
chunk.
if you do harvest just a little bit, keep it going.
Keep it going.
Don't just make one batch and compost it or throw it out. You can keep that going for months, if not a whole year, off just a little chunk.
Cool. Any other favorites other than we've mentioned now when it comes to functional medicines? What would you say, or up and comers that most people don't know about? Any rising stars in your world?
Rising stars for functional mushrooms would be, we work with 10. So a couple other famous functional mushrooms would be shiitake, maitake, and turkey tail. So those probably would be the three other most famous. And they're known for their 1316 beta glucans. So those immune supporting compounds. So in shiitake, lentinin is probably the most famous compound. And maitake MD fraction is that famous 1316 beta glucan, and then for turkey tail it's PSP and PSK, and all those compounds help support your immune system and help you feel in the best you could possibly be. The other fungi that we work with, one is tremella, and that is really famous in the skincare industry, and it actually helps absorb water up to 400 times more than hydrochloric acid. So it's unbelievable for supporting skin health and overall longevity and health. The other is Poria cocos, or Wolfiporia extensa is the Latin name. And it looks like a yam, and it is a sclerotia. So it's similar to chaga, in which it's not technically a mushroom. It's this resting stage in between mycelium and a mushroom. And that, overall health and wellness, for immune support and supporting overall mood. And the other mushroom is Mishima. So Phalenus lentius is the Latin name. And that's great. Actually roughly translates to women's island. And it grows on mulberry trees, most famously in Japan. And it's overall great for supporting immune health and overall women's health and longevity.
Very cool. And in your opinion, is it best to take these as a tincture because it's more concentrated? Like, can you just eat the mushrooms and get the same result, or you have to eat a lot of them to get a similar benefit? And I see like other products in like coffees and teas, and what is the best way to consume them? Is it however you can, or?
Yeah, totally. I mean, one is however you can. Any mushrooms is good, so any little bit that you can put in your diet, or your nutrient stack every single day is great, right? If you can get one step above that, if you can get the most potent, then that's even better, right? And so you will get some supportive benefits by just eating shiitake or maitake, which you can find in the grocery store. There's other mushrooms or fungi like chaga or reishi or mishima that are really hardy. You can't really cook them, right? You can't really eat them. And so you need to extract them. And there's tons of formats in which you can ingest mushrooms, from tinctures to capsules to powder, etc., coffee. It's really what's easiest for you. We focused on tinctures because of the bioavailability piece. And so with a tincture, and they became really famous with the CBD industry, but tinctures have been used forever, right?
Yeah.
Since like high proof alcohol has been around. And what they do is you can absorb those functional compounds sublingually. So in receptors in your mouth, which bypass the liver and enter your bloodstream a lot faster. And not only that, so they enter your bloodstream a lot faster, but since they're not encapsulated or XYZ, your body can actually absorb up to 95% of those functional compounds, whereas something that your body has to digest, you're most likely probably only getting like 50% of those compounds. You're probably, excreting the rest, right? And that's a common problem with vitamins and supplements. So any way that we can help our body bypass any of those processes, the better, to make it more bioavailable to our body and enter the bloodstream a lot faster. So
Interesting. And then from I guess a perspective of tinctures, because I've tinkered with tinctures myself. Like water extraction versus alcohol extraction. Are there other extraction methods? What's the best? What's the difference, and why? What did you guys choose to do? Do you guys do different extractions, or do you guys stick with
yeah,
one?
we use alcohol and water, and there's a lot of solvents out there, and I won't get super deep into the chemistry, but there's polar and non-polar compounds in functional mushrooms, and they're locked in these chitin walls, and these really hardy structures. So we need to break them down to make them bioavailable. And so that's something as a consumer to look for if something is dual extracted, or just extracted, period. There's a lot of powders out there that these companies will, one, not even use mushrooms. They'll use mycelium on grain. And then second, they'll just dehydrate them and blend them up to a powder. So multiple levels of just kind of a weak
So
product.
what's the difference between a single extraction and dual extraction?
So some companies will just do a water extraction. So you're only getting those polar compounds available. So those are the 1,3,1,6 beta glucans. The non-polar are things like triterpenes and reishi, the cordycepin and cordyceps. Those, triterpenes, really non-sterile supportive compounds. And so you want a full spectrum extraction from the fruiting body, and that's only available if you do a dual extraction.
The second one would be an alcohol, so water and then alcohol, or just do water twice?
No, it would be water and alcohol. So the water is pulling half the compounds, and the alcohol is pulling the other half that the water can't pull. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a jar with some reishi and some organic alcohol. It's been sitting under my cabinet for about 10 years now. So I wonder, can it go, like, is it is there too long that it sits in an extraction? Will it ever go bad, or just continue to extract?
Yeah, alcohol is pretty stable. So out of all the solvents, alcohol is great, because if it's over like 30%, you're good. It's shelf stable. It won't go bad. We have an expiration date of 2 years to 5 years on our products, but really, if someone buried our tincture and they found it in a couple hundred years, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Right. Okay, so I just want to change gears for a bit. I know we're reaching close to the hour mark. Psychedelic mushrooms. I know there's a whole industry starting to sort of evolve around that for tools for mental health and other exploratory interests, I guess is the best way to say it. Is that something your company may dive into? What do you think the potentials are for that? Can you comment on that? Just curious your thoughts and where you guys are at with that. Something I'm really passionate and interested in personally.
I am as well. And, psilocybin containing mushrooms have been crucial for my own health and well-being. And, from macro dosing of taking 3.5 to, a lot of grams. And
I'm curious, what's a lot for you?
Well, I think the most I've ever taken was my first time. And I literally to this day have no idea how much I took, but someone gave me a full red Solo cup full of dried mushrooms and
Nice.
told, I was like, oh, okay, that's great. You don't have a bag or anything. You're just going to hand it to me in a cup. And I asked, I was like, so how much is this? And he's like, well, it's for free if you eat it all on the spot. And
okay.
First time I ever ate mushrooms, I had no idea what a dose was. And I was like, okay, a cup is a dose. That's like cooking. I was like, okay. And this was like week 1 of college, right? And so I was in that college spirit of, okay, I got to prove myself or whatever, and I got to try some stuff. And so I ate them and was the most ego shattering, just
okay, of course,
unbelievable experience in the world. And there was no concept of me, and I was the universe, right? And it was seeing and being the universe, just creating and destructing before my eyes in a matter of split seconds. I mean, time, everything was just an illusion. It was being one with like the 7th dimension. It was unbelievable. But it's less about the dose.
Before you were into mushrooms? Was this before you?
This was like this. This was the on ramp. I was coming onto the highway, and it helped a lot. I didn't have an easeful journey into the mushroom space. I was, I drop kicked my way through the door, and have not turned back since. And I think psilocybin mushrooms, I'll microdose a lot, so that's like 0.2 to 0.4 grams. And it really is, a lot of biohackers use this term of a 1% improvement. And so a lot of people are looking for these massive improvements of your life. And those big trips can help, can kick a bad habit or something. But those 1% is so important and crucial of just taking your normal perspective, your paradigm, and having a slight shift on it. So something that's mundane becomes really magical and special. A habit that or something you take for granted is something you're really grateful for, or a habit that you haven't really thought about being bad or unhelpful for your dreams or your life. You have that perspective shift and you're like, you know what, that's not the healthiest, and maybe I should change that. And it's so subtle that we can really make these habits. It's hard to make really radical shifts in our life and have them stick. But those 1% every day, you'll look back in a year and you'll be 365% better, right? And
Right.
it's gradual. It's really easeful. So I love microdosing, but there's a time and place for macrodosing as well. If you're stuck and you need to drop kick through the door, and you
Right.
just need to have mushrooms rattle your cage and bring you back home
Yeah,
to
just
your.
I find it so fascinating that, they do things at such a small dose, and they also do things at a super large dose. And I also find interesting that, from the best of our knowledge, you cannot overdose on them. There is no upper limit that becomes toxic. I've found fascinating some of the talks from Kalindi Yi. I even had Kyle Kingsbury on my podcast before, talking about his 30-gram experience, which kind of inspired me to do a 16-gram experience with Penis Envy, which, also ego shattering and quite interesting, to say the least. But brings me to the question is, like, what do you think, like, the purpose of these experiences are? Like, like, one of the things that sort of came to me on my macro dose was, I had this vision of a hunter-gatherer thousands, millions of years ago, very hungry, finding a field of psychedelic mushrooms, a mushroom patch.
Yeah,
And it was like, okay, if you're hungry, how much are you going to eat? Well, until you're
a
full,
lot.
until you're
Yeah.
full. And then, wow, just like imagine what that was like, not even knowing, like, you probably think you're dead, like what's happened, but like, boom, shift in consciousness, open to new possibilities, maybe, evolution of mankind, who knows, right?
I could talk about this for the next 5 hours, but since we're short on time, that is a theory called the Stone Deep theory by Terence McKenna. And he
Mm-hmm.
first proposed that psilocybin containing mushrooms were crucial for our human evolution, right? And so when we were hunters and gatherers, hadn't even developed language yet, we stumbled upon mushrooms, whether following dung of an animal that we were trying to hunt, saw the mushrooms popping out of the dung. We're super hungry because we hadn't caught that animal yet. And because we're so hungry, stuffed our face with these mushrooms and had this incredible experience. And through that, and through millions of years of neurogenesis, and trying to communicate that with our fellow brothers and sisters or whatever, we had to develop language and religion and evolution. However, a lot of people will, put a lot of significance to psilocybin containing mushrooms of like, why are they here? Are they here to as a plan B for humans to evolve our consciousness and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, not at all. We are not the star of the show. And that is one of the cosmic jokes of mushrooms is they're super humbling. And it's like, no, drop your spiritual ego. You ain't shit. Like, sorry for excuse
I
my
love
French,
it.
but you don't mean anything. You're just a tiny speck of the universe. And psilocybin actually evolved hundreds of millions of years before the first early humanoid ever existed on the planet. And they evolved to control insects. So similar to cordyceps. And I think it was a pre-mechanisms before the evolution of cordyceps, is that, a million years ago, fungi were coming on the planet. They created this symbiosis with plants that I started talking about before. And about 420 million years ago, insects started coming on the planet and making holes in the earth and nibbling at those fungi and the plant roots. And so in defense, these fungi created all these drug-like compounds, these amphetamines, a precursor to LSD, and psilocybin, right? And so we have hundreds of millions of years of documentation of fungi excreting psilocybin into insects to control their behavior. And so that's why it started. It's not to have us tripped out, right? It's not for humans. Like mushrooms are not for humans at all. We just happen to stumble upon the planet and stumble upon them. But yeah.
It's so interesting because it's also interesting where it takes you. You know what I mean? To think that like our bodies physically and even our minds and wherever that takes place, you know, something otherworldly happens in this sort of like connection that we have with that sort of substance. So it's mind-boggling to me to continue to explore and ponder, like, you know, like what you just told me. News to me, you know,
and our bodies actually evolved to consume and support psilocybin. So, I mean, if we look at our serotonin system, the serotonin molecule is just like one doohinging off of psilocybin, and psilocybin is just one doohinging away from dimethyltryptamine or DMT, which our body naturally produces. And so through our evolution, we actually evolved to have the key opening for the psilocybin to enter our system and interact, or psilocin to interact with our system. And so we evolved for mushrooms, not the other way around. And so it really speaks to our lack of evolution, that we cannot interact with the world as much as these fungi can, or other organisms. We can't speak with them. We don't know what the hell is going on in the forest and these ecosystems. So as we evolve, you know, I'm hoping that we drop our egos and we can just create more of a symbiosis with the ecosystems around us, and, you know, realize that we're not the star of the show. We're just a speck. But we have such significance on the way we can disrupt these systems. And a lot of people say, like, you know, we got to save the world. We got to save the planet. Right. And I get caught in this trip a lot with us planting trees, and we're like, oh, like pat on the back, like, great, we're saving the planet, but the planet will be fine. Right. Mm. It's saving Homo sapiens, right? We'll nuke each other out, and there's extreme organisms like tardigrades and fungi that'll eat the radioactive waste and be totally thriving in a nuclear fallout, right? And it's humans that will go extinct, and the world will recreate biodiversity again, and we'll be fine. So, you know, I think we can utilize psilocybin to help prevent that nuclear fallout and for us killing each other, and to just stop hating each other, and, you know, just freaking love each other already. But so I think it's a tool, but I don't think fungi are here for us, right? But we can form a relationship, and I think, you know, we have the receptors, we evolved it, and I think, you know, it's a beautiful relationship.
Amazing. Yeah, really well put. Okay, last question for me is there any question that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have, or something that you want to share that we haven't touched on?
I guess just the definition of a mushroom, right?
All right, let's keep it simple. So maybe we should have like started there.
101. But yeah, a lot of people don't know what it is. Yeah, a lot of people don't know what it is. And a lot of people have no idea what mycology is, or fungi. So, you know, fungi are its own kingdom, or queendom, as a lot of people like to say. Totally different from plants, totally different from animalia, totally different from bacteria. They're their own kingdom, or queendom. And so they include yeasts and molds and mushrooms that we know, like the emoji on our phone, right? That cap and stem stereotypical mushroom. And most people don't know that they interact with fungi on a daily basis. So we're constantly, every breath that we take, are inhaling hundreds, if not thousands, of mushroom spores. And most people, like, I had a breakfast sandwich this morning and that had bread in it, and there's yeast in that bread. And so most people consume fungi on a daily basis, or probably at the end of the day, I'll have a beer, right? And that has yeast in it. And so most people consume, and fungi are a crucial point of their life, and they don't even know it, right? And so there's estimated 5 million species on this planet of fungi that, and we've only discovered 120,000 of those 5 million species of fungi. And most people just think mushrooms, right? The cap and stem, but most they interact without a mushroom. So like a yeast or a mold, without that cap and stem, like mushroom. So out of those 120,000 of fungi that we have described, only 14,000 of those actually produce that mushroom, that fruiting body that we know. And so it's a really small percentage. And most are just hiding underneath the soil. We have up to 60 different species of fungi in our mouth, believe it or not, on our skin, in our gut. Like we have a whole microbiome in our system, in addition to the microbiome, that bacteria in our system that is crucial to support our health and wellness. And, out of that 14,000, about 50% are inedible, like chaga or a conch. You'll break your teeth if you try to eat that. And 25% are edible, but they're not that great. If you're in a survival situation, you could probably eat it, but you won't say yum afterwards. And 20%, you can eat it, but it'll give you a stomach ache. You probably won't want to eat it again. You'll be holding your stomach for the next few hours, and I'm sure your significant other will want to plug their nose or something. And 4% are super tasty. They're delectable. You'll see them in farmers markets and in high-end restaurants and grocery stores, things like that. So it's only 4%, and only 1% will send you to the hospital, right? They'll severely harm you. And only about a dozen will kill you. So, and surprisingly, there's more poisonous plants than there are poisonous mushrooms. They just get a bad rep for those dozen or so that will kill you. And so definitely if you're looking for mushrooms, consult an expert. There's guidebooks that you can do. There's Facebook groups. There's local mushroom foraging groups that you can consult. But mushrooms are incredible. Fungi are the humble stewards of our ecosystems. And I'm just super excited to share this with people. And I hope I rub off on my mushroom love on other people. And just next time you go out in the woods, just look. And I'm sure you'll see 8 bazillion types of fungi and mushrooms that you've never even seen in your life. And you'll be infected for life. It'll never go away, hopefully.
Awesome. That was fantastic. Okay. So in closing here, I guess, what's next for Alex and Mushroom Revival, and how do people get a hold of you and connect with you and your podcast and all that stuff?
Yeah, we will continue growing. We'll continue to plant trees. We'll continue to push out as much free mushroom content as possible. You can find us. The easiest would be our website, mushroomrevival.com. And you can find our podcast on all streaming platforms, and also on our website. It's Mushroom Revival Podcast. And we have a ton of blogs on our site as well. We post about 12 a month, and there's recipes, there's 101s, health information, everything you can imagine. So you could also find us on all social media platforms as well. And if you want to try our functional mushroom products, you can use the coupon code Elemental. It's all uppercase letters, and that's for 15% off your first purchase. And please reach out anytime. As you can tell, more than happy to talk about mushrooms with anyone, anytime, and always here for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for spending this time and educating and dropping some of your knowledge. Super excited to try some of your products. I'm definitely going to be the first to use the Elemental code and grab some. And everyone who's watching, check out Alex's podcast. It's also called Mushroom Revival.
Mushroom Revival Podcast. Keeping it easy.
Keeping it easy. Okay, guys. So thanks for all the support, comments, likes, follows. I appreciate you guys. Thank you, Alex. And thank you to the Mushroom Kingdom and Mother Earth and all the amazing gifts that it gives us on a daily basis. So until next time, guys, Gio signing off. And our guest, Alex, thank you once again.
Much love.